Hello, and welcome again to our continuing series on spiritual discernment. Spiritual discernment for those dark spirits that plague us, vexate us, and just basically cause various obsessions in our mind. Welcome to Swords of St. Michael channel. My name is Farah Rose Perry, OFS, Sister Farah, Professed Lay Franciscan secular sister. And on this channel, I'm hoping you'll tool around a little bit here at Swords of St. Michael. We've got everything from the Auxilium Christianorum prayers, subliminal, to praying the rosary in English and Latin. You know, if you're doing a 27-day, 54-day rosary novena, we have all sorts of spiritual warfare stuff that is going to help you on your journey to clear your mind and rest in the promises of God. So, today's episode, we're getting into Discernments of Spirits, and I want to welcome you because Timothy Gallager, OMB, is our guide. We're taking snippets from this book, and you can find this book just about anywhere, Discernment of Spirits, to learn about how we can counter the enemy, because the battlefield is definitely in our mind. Welcome, everyone. I'm hoping that as you go along, if this is your first time here, that you will get some sort of inspiration out of this to fight the evil that constantly plagues us in our daily lives, in our minds, and the images and things that we encounter every day. And if you do, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you know somebody that might be interested in diving a little bit deeper to fight those nasties that occur in our minds, can you share it? That would be even better. Today we are going to talk about Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is a time for patience. The last few chapters we've been covering the effects of spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation. And what that is in times that we are in love with our faith and our prayer life, and we're feeling so positive, and we're getting all these gratuitous feelings and consolations of confirmation that everything we're doing good. The interesting thing, we're going to enter times of spiritual desolation from time to time. And this chapter is going to focus on how we can get through it with patience. So I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us. The Discernment of Spirits, an Ignation Guide for Everyday Living. Notes by Timothy M. Gallager, OMB. Chapter 8, Spiritual Desolation, a Time for Patience. Endurance in time of trial. 8th rule. The 8th. Let one who is in desolation work to be patient, which is contrary to the vexations which will come to him, and let him think that he will soon be consoled. Diligently using the means against such desolation as is said in the 6th rule. The rule describes a twofold call to persons in time of spiritual desolation: a call to work towards something, maintaining an attitude of patience, and a call to think of something. Consolation will soon return. This thinking is, in its own turn, linked to action. It is to be accompanied by the diligent use of the means outlined in the 6th rule: prayer, meditation, examination, and suitable penance. The thinking and related action described in the second part of the rule assist us in the working to be in patience proposed in the first part of the rule. Now we're going to look closely at the first and then the second part of this rule. It will take effort and resolve. Service, performed whatever the cost. Prayer, work, charity. The endeavor to maintain serenity through it all. The attempt to live with a greater love in time of darkness than in time of peace. This is the portrait of a person working to remain faithfully patient in a time of spiritual desolation. Such work is the spiritual equivalent, for example, of the marathon runner who feels the fatigue of many miles already run, but does not cease running until the race is fully completed. Of the family member who cares for another family member through an extended illness, faithful to the task, notwithstanding the effort required, until the illness is healed. Of a student at the end of a semester studying for the one examination after another, and who faithfully continues to study, at the price of prolonged effort until the last examination is completed. When in like manner, we too remain faithful to prayer, to service, to our spiritual commitments, and to our calling in general, in spite of the urgings of spiritual desolation to admit defeat. We are working to remain patient. Persons who respond to spiritual desolation in this way will not only be harmed by it, or only not be harmed by it, but will also grow greatly through the effort to stand firm while this desolation lasts. In Rule 7, Ignatius advised persons in spiritual desolation to consider that such desolation may be a trial permitted by the Lord for their own spiritual growth. And by resisting, they become increasingly able to resist. This consideration serves to hearten them, to fortify their strength in resisting spiritual desolation. Now, once more, Ignatius invites persons in spiritual desolation to adopt a certain type of thinking that will further assist in resisting the desolation. Quote unquote. Let him think that he will soon be consoled. Spiritual desolation can claim power over both the spiritual past and future. Ignatius, as we have seen, in his time of spiritual desolation, feels remote, separated from the divine persons, as if I have never felt anything of them or never would again. The enemy falsely claims such power and instills a conviction that the present afflictions will remain unaltered into the future. In Dostoevsky's words, present desolation is often accompanied by a feeling of something permanent, eternal, foreboding and foretelling hopeless years of this cold and deathly misery. There is a special kind of a spiral of grace here. When persons in spiritual desolation think that the desolation will not characterize the future forever, but that this spiritual consolation will soon return, then fortified by this choice of thinking, they will gain increased energy to employ the four means mentioned in the sixth rule. And when they diligently use these four means, the thinking of which Ignatius speaks will become all the more possible. Those persons who are humble Trust in God's sufficing grace. Think and act in this way. They are solidly set on the path to overcoming spiritual desolation. We touch here on the mystery of this divine grace and human effort working together. Such persons may say with Paul, "His grace to me has not been ineffective. Indeed, I have toiled harder than all of them. Not I. However, but the grace of God that is with me." 1 Corinthians 15:10. The counsel here in Rule 8 that persons in spiritual desolation think of the spiritual consolation soon to return invites us to note an Ignatian view of spiritual experiences in general. For Ignatius, the ongoing alternation of these two spiritual movements is a normal pattern of everyday spiritual life. Neither spiritual consolation nor spiritual desolation lasts forever. Each will eventually give way to the other. Having experienced spiritual consolation, we are not to be surprised that spiritual desolation should arise once more. And when, as Ignatius tells us in this rule, we are in spiritual desolation, we should think ahead to the inevitable return of spiritual consolation, thereby depriving the present desolation of much of its power. Spiritual consolation followed by spiritual desolation. This spiritual desolation followed once again by spiritual consolation. The spiritual consolation followed in turn by further spiritual desolation. This is the normal alternation experienced by every disciple of the Lord down through the centuries and today. End quote. Both spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation lie within God's loving providence, the first given and the second permitted by God. And both are a lesson through which God offers us much spiritual growth. Ignatius' teaching in his 8th rule offers a kind of spiritual liberation in the same vein. When dedicated people undergo spiritual desolation, as they inevitably will, they may assume that they are all the only ones who experience these repeated fluctuations than others. More spiritually rooted than they, progress in an effectively linear fashion, always desirous of the things of God, always able to sense God's nearness in prayer, rarely or never feeling without hope or far from God. The fact that they themselves, after periods of feeling spiritual, energized, find themselves feeling so disheartened and so distant from God seems to evidence of their weakness and lack of spiritual progress. Much can change when, like Ignatius, we understand that such alternations of spiritual consolation and desolation are normal spiritual experience common to all. God's loving call to growth reaches each and all in both spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation. God calls us to grow both through the light and energy received in spiritual consolation and through the strength we will develop by resisting in time of spiritual desolation. The more we become people of discernment, aware of what is spiritually stirring within, able to understand this, able to accept what is of the good spirit and able to reject what is of the enemy, the greater will be the fruit of spiritual consolation in their hearts, and the less will be the duration and intensity and harm of the spiritual desolation in their lives. Ignatius offers them his rules with their instruction concerning those spiritual realities and their guidelines for action in response to them, precisely to assist them in this all-important endeavor. Wow. It's one thing to understand that as Christians, we're going to have a dark night of the soul, or we might, like St. John of the Cross, we might have those times that it's really scary to think that we're not going to feel God near us. We're not going to feel like he loves us. We're not going to feel, why are we praying? Why are we bothering to pray? Why are we bothering to focus our prayers on something or someone that is bearing little to no fruit? We feel desolate. We're inconsolable. Those are the lies of the enemy. And this is where we are called, each of us, to discern the good spirit or the bad spirit. And in this chapter, Ignatius is bringing us back and around to the tools he presented earlier. I really, really, really like this. I think that if we look at this spiritual desolation and the time for patience, we are going to see that I, for one, don't have a lot of patience. I am just absolutely, I am one of those people that I just dive in and do everything. And I don't really pay attention to some of the little things that might be calling me to slow down. And that's how I end up in spiritual desolation, in periods that I feel helpless. And I'll tell you what, between you and me and the glorious throne upstairs that loves me, my biggest help in my entire 60 years on this planet, a rosary novena. Now, if people are unfamiliar with rosaries or prayer beads, a rosary is a string of beads that you pray a certain set of prayers on for a specific intention. Not always. People pray the rosary because it gives them consolation, because they love Jesus' mother, because they have specific things they want to pray for, the world, peace, etc. I have always loved the peace of being able to pray those prayers in tandem with a specific meditation on my mind, a specific intention, and usually I'll add up to 3. I mean, if I'm going to ask Jesus, I'm going to load the plate and go, here, I need this and this and this. I do. I'm really bad about that because I know that this is going to last for 54 days, 27 days asking, 27 days thanking God for fulfilling that. So, for me, when I think of the four square works that we can do to focus on getting rid of that feeling of spiritual desolation, we can come into a place of patience. That's what I think of. Now, I did not write on the screen our thoughts and notes for productively applying Ignatius's wisdom. So I'm going to give it to you straight, and I'm going to probably repeat it a couple times. But I'm also going to remind you, I'm hoping you're enjoying this. Please give it a thumbs up, a like. I would love it if you would leave me a comment, either on the lesson or maybe a future book you'd like me to cover for spiritual formation, spiritual warfare. I love this Discernment of Spirits because it really does have us focused on where these quote-unquote feelings come from. I think today we live in a society that we're just so, oh, my feelings are hurt. Oh, my feelings are this. And if we understand anything about spiritual warfare, feelings lie. Feelings lie greatly. So in order to rely on the sensations that we've been given by God, we really have to put them through a rigorous thought process, a discernment process, an examination process that tells us, if I continue these thoughts, where will these thoughts lead me? That's a really good point about discernment. So, chapter 8, if you've got your notebooks, let's pull your notebooks out. Thank you so much. In this time for patience, number one, when I read this, I was thinking, okay, how can I apply this? Because it's difficult. I'm not a patient person. I don't know if I ever will be. I'm probably going to work on it the rest of my life. And if you have developed patience, would you put a note down there and share with me how you worked to achieve that patient calm? Because me, I'm like the Tasmanian devil. I'm like the ping pong ball going everywhere because I got to get it done. And I do need help. So for number one, for spiritual exercises, thoughts with this one, I'd like us to write down, what are two ways, just, or even one, what are two ways that we can choose, mentally or physically, to counter the vexations of the spirit that come with the direct lie of spiritual desolation? Two ways. What can we do when we're thinking, I'm all alone, I have nobody's going to pray for me, nobody's going to be with me? What are ways that we can twist this around? What are two things we can do when we have these thoughts? And a vexation, that's coming at us in our mind, reminding us, how pitiful we are, how ridiculous we are, how nobody's going to hear our prayers. What are two things that we can do? Do we have a trusted colleague we can call? Can we call our spiritual director? Can we join a Bible study and maybe call one of them to discuss why we were triggered into thinking these negative thoughts? What are two things? Two things that we can choose to do to counter the vexations of the spirit. Two. I'd like us to think about, when we look at the Ignation 4-Square Guide to fighting this, prayer, meditation, examination, and penance related to the opposite of what we're being tempted to run away from. So when we look at those four things, number two is, what action, what thought, what reminder can we write down and keep in our wallet? What can we do to specifically embrace this thought of, God will soon console me. Jesus loves me, and I'm not going to feel this way forever. I'm not going to feel alone forever. I am not going to feel unloved. I'm not going to feel as if my prayers are not answered forever. What are specific actions that we can do? Maybe it's something as simple as examining, our prayer life and thinking, wow, 10 years ago I was here and I was doing this, and I got into a rut because maybe, I lost my job, I was in a car accident, I lost my pet, my child moved away and didn't talk to me, maybe I lost a parent, and it just triggered me into some spiritual desolation. What was it that we did? Examine ourselves. What did we do? Let's say if you lost a parent that absolutely loved volunteering at the homeless shelter, did you decide, what? As an act of penance, so I don't run away from what I'm feeling, did you devote yourself to volunteering at a homeless shelter? Did you choose to, if you lost a pet, did you choose to go volunteer at a no-kill shelter for pets? What was it that you did that lifted you out of this desolation and into patience, to get you geared to think I'm going to be consoled by God. I'm going to have that excitement again. I'm going to have that feeling that I'm loved again. Think about that and make some notes. I want to thank you for joining us, and I say us because Jacob Deal is still continuing in the tradition to help with all the technical things that I don't understand, whereas Mr. Perry, my husband, is like my biggest fan, supporter, and he helps me think of new show ideas. So I've got some great stuff coming up. I'm hoping you enjoy this, the Ignation Guide to Discerning Spirits. I hope it greatly blesses you. Never forget the battle's already been won, and hopefully Swords of St. Michael is here to win the fight with you and help you win it right. Please give this video a thumbs up, a like, or comment. I want to hear how do you guys deal with not having patience? And God bless you and keep you. Until next time, God bless.